exporting, which means that phrase is saved forever. But this is Let the Project Flow, front end and PM lessons learned from building a Drupal 8 website for one of the nation's largest water utilities, Denver Water. And I'm going to just jump right into this. So today, we're going to be kind of introing, then I'll talk a little bit about CIVIC research. Then I'm going to get into some of the Drupal 8 stuff we were doing, the modules, the way and why of Zen theme, which is what we used on this project, Twig and Twig tweak. I'm going to talk a little bit about paragraphs, which are amazing and will change the way you think about content. Then I'm going to just do a few little notes on accessibility and caching, and then talk about where we are and takeaways. So first about me, I've been building websites since 1998. My first site was on GeoCities. It was black background, red text. It used frames, and it was all about Star Wars and Ben Folds 5. So I've come a long way from that point. So now I've been using Drupal for almost 10 years, mostly in the higher education and government and library space. Denver Water was my first Drupal 8 project, and I was terrified, but I made it through. And if you have any enterprise Drupal 8 projects coming up, it's okay. We're going to talk about it, and you're going to be fine. So a little bit about interpersonal frequency, or IF, and what we do is we leverage data for public organizations to create and maintain amazing digital spaces. We were founded by a PhD data scientist about 9 years ago, and some of our clients, include baltimorecity.gov, mo.gov, dc.gov, sandiego.gov, the New York Advanced Warning System, Denver Water, and more. So we work in the government space. We're working to improve government websites and the experience of, the web that citizens use online. We're just trying to make the internet even better, especially for a lot of these civic sites, how they can be. So talking a little bit about the project goals, we wanted to design a clean, easy to navigate, modern and responsive new website. I mean, that's pretty much a given. If you're going to be doing a new website, it's got to be clean, it's got to be responsive. We wanted to focus on improving Pay My Bill and Manage My Account, so that's the ones we had control over, because of course there are third-party systems that needed to be integrated with or linked out to, and I'm sure everybody in this room, you've never had to deal with a third-party system ever. It's all, it's all good, everything's great. You don't have to deal with small type or things you don't have control over. No, none of that, right? Yeah. So we wanted to make the rebates and conservation areas more robust. So basically, you want to get a $150 rebate for a toilet, we want to help you do that and make it as easy as possible. We wanted to make it easy for residential, business, and contractors to get their general information. So that was a lot of the IA. We sort of flipped around the existing infrastructure and made it more audience-driven. More on that in a second. We wanted to make content easier to administrate on the back end. So that has a lot to do with paragraphs. And then we wanted to make customers happy, both the external ones that are going to the site and the internal ones that are using the site. So I'm going to talk a little bit about civic research and some considerations when we think about civic research and why it's a little bit different. First of all, we're talking about a lot of visits here, so 250,000 a year plus, depending on the site. Just so many visits and a lot of data to work with. We also have more audiences that need to be served, and those audiences are both internal and external. So our friend Jim from the DMV, he may have some desires for the website, but that's different than the person who's just trying to renew their license and everything like that. And then the way we approach it is we have a three-pronged approach that sort of mitigates the risk around all this civic research. We have our Voice of Citizen analytics tool, which I'll talk about in a minute. We also do in-depth interviews, so we'll go on site with customers, we'll talk to them, we'll find out their pain points, we'll talk about what's really grinding their gears, and then we'll use that to inform kind of the designs we build. And then those designs are tested. We have usability testing done internally and by third parties, third-party services. So I want to talk a little bit about one aspect of the Voice of Citizen tool, and that's our URL diagnostic tool. And this is a little bit small, so I'm going to zoom in. Hey, isn't a Keynote great? It has so many transitions. We'll be doing more today. So it's a little bit small, but basically what we're looking at here is this top URL. Everything here is ranked by a relative importance, and that's what that first value in the column is. So these are the things that are coming up that are the pain points for the site, and we can see that this is the Manage My Account, this is the Pay My Bill screen. So these are the pain points that we knew we were going to have to work with. And then if we go into the next column, we are talking about the efficiency index. So what this means is when we have a negative number in the efficiency index, there's a wayfinding issue. So people can't get to this content. So it's something with the architecture or it's just buried somewhere. When we have a positive number in the efficiency index, it means that there's something wrong with the content. So it might not exactly be the content on the page like, okay, somebody double spaced everything. Nope, not happening. No, it's more about maybe there's a link missing or something about the content itself, not necessarily the quality of it, but the contents of it is not really working. And then this is how we use it. So this is an example for a library, but it applies the same for any kind of civic or library site that we do. So we structure the information architecture to support the most common tasks rather than internal operational divisions. So Jim from the DMV might want one click to get to a certain thing, but we really want to have people to be able to click once and get to pay their parking ticket. So we're really thinking about the end user versus the internal organizational divisions and stuff like that. And we use feedback from millions of websites across America, and we found that users value the ease of use and intuitive organization over all of their website design aspects and features. So it doesn't matter what version of jQuery slider that you're using, as long as the IA is good and the organization is good, then you're going to have success. And people don't have patience for this. And they don't have patience on their phones, and everybody's using their phones. So it's really important to get this right when you're doing it. So now I'm going to transition and I'm going to talk about Drupal 8. And I was terrified when I was kicking off this Drupal 8 project. I went to DrupalCon in Austin in 2014 and I had Drupal 8 training then. And I don't think I've used any of it. I mean, it's completely different and it's been 3 years. So Drupal 8, I mean, are we sure it's ready? What about caching? What's a twig? Bro, do you even YAML? And I'm pleased to report that we took the plunge. Yeah, it's a water presentation. I made a water pun. We haven't looked back. We have the beautiful Drupal 8 moon rising over the Rocky Mountains. So it's actually been really great. And Drupal 8 is ready for the prime time. It's ready to be out there on enterprise sites. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our Drupal 8 experience here in a sort of techie way. So Drupal 8 modules. So in D7 you have admin menu. In D8 it's admin toolbar. In D7 it's XML sitemap. And in D8, it's simple XML sitemap. Why? I don't know, but I'm telling you. So now you know. And knowing is half the battle, or whatever. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some helpful modules in Drupal 8 that really made things easier for our end users and also for the users on the site. And also, these slides are on the presentation, so feel free to take pictures. I know they're beautiful. I owe my creative director so much for this beautiful PowerPoint or Keynote template. But you can download the slides on the presentation screen too. So link it. This is like autocomplete linking. It's in Drupal 7, but it's also stable in Drupal 8. So people can start typing the name of a page or a file, and it just autocompletes, and it's very nice for them. Date pop-up. No calendar widget in core, so you need the date pop-up module. Entity reference tab formatter helps with accordions. It helps kind of set up how the title and the content for the accordions work together. Entity reference revisions and view reference field are for paragraph embeds. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. The paragraph embeds and paragraphs in general are very magical, and I'm very excited to share about that with you. File entity, it's good enough. I put file entity on the site, and the web content editor over at Denver Water I was working with was very happy when I said it. He said, "You rock." And this is a guy who's like very chill. I hope he's watching this someday. And I didn't really expect to get like a "you rock" out of it. So file entity, it's good enough. It's beta 3. You're going to be using some beta modules in Drupal 8 still. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. Menu block for things that didn't make it into core. So being able to select where you want to start the menu from and doing menu depth, that's not in core. You need menu block for that. Twig tweak, which I'm going to talk about very soon, and is amazing. It saved me so much time. It'll save you time too. And then paragraphs, we'll talk about that in a little bit. So first I'm going to talk about Zen. And Zen's been around forever. And people use Zen, people use Bootstrap, people use Framework. I was using Framework back in Drupal 6, and that was my bread and butter for several years. But I really like Zen, and I like Zen in Drupal 8, and I want to talk a little bit about why, just in the context of this project. So first of all, Chroma color management is built in Super easy to find your color variables and then reference them in your CSS. So I'll talk a little bit about this more later, but the color stuff is super easy to use and really helpful for sort of defining that. It'll make your creative directors happy if you're working with them, because they can have as many colors as they'd like, and if things need to change, they can change very easily. And same goes for typography. So in your variables SCSS file, you can define all of your font faces, and then you can define typefaces. So you can combine your font cuts with the weight, with whether you want small caps or uppercase, or you want italicized text or whatever. So it's a really easy way to define all of the libraries of your type, and then use a simple include, and then bam, there you go. You've got your nice typeface in there. Of course, responsive. Responsive is extremely important, and this is easy breakpoint definition. You can use your basic ones here, but you can even include more. So if you're having issues getting below 414 pixels, you can do an extra small. You can do an extra, extra small. And I did a lot of that. So, I mean, it was maybe 2 weeks of my life where I was just going like this and breaking everything and having a panic attack because things were broken and the menu was broken. I'll talk about the menu in a minute. But this was super helpful because it set the standard for where those breakpoints are, and they could be variably changed and referenced. And that's just another include. And then you wrap your CSS in that include, and it responds to whatever size we're talking about here. And it's really easy to try yourself. So when I got into the Zen theme originally, there are so many files. I think easily like 100, 200 files that are in there, and it's like, what am I going to do with this? But DRUSH Zen still works in Zen 8. So you just have to type DRUSH Zen. You can put your theme name, your machine name. You can do the description. It spits everything out, and then you just drag it to your custom directory, and you're good to start rocking and rolling. So it's a really good theme, and it's really flexible. I've really liked it. It's been great for this project. I've been building on it, and I've got some other projects coming up, and I'm going to stick with Zen. It's been working out great. So I want to get into a little bit about Twig, some essentials. You got to turn on debugging. So the first thing you need to do is make sure you've got a settings local PHP and a development services YAML file configured. And this Drupal page is really good. So it's really helpful to check this out. It'll get you set up. It's how I was able to do it. So you just need to make sure twig debug is true and cache is false. So when you have cache is false, then you're not constantly having to do a DRUSH CR every time you want to look at your new CSS. So it's really helpful to have this when you're debbing locally. And then, of course, you get your wonderful template suggestion output when you have this turned on. So you can see, like the line above the one that's highlighted, we're beginning output from one of my custom templates in my DWZen custom theme for the main menu. And, of course, it makes me calm. I love this type of organization. It really helps with your transition from tpl.php files to the Twig files. It's great. It's really good. And now I want to talk about Twig, which is described as a Twig extension with some useful functions and filters that can improve development experience. I think this is the understatement of the century because Twig Tweak rocks. It is so helpful. It is so amazing. And I will tell you why. First of all, that Twig Tweak project page is really good too. They have a whole block of code that shows you everything that you can do with Twig Tweak. I'm going to tell you about one thing that you can do and how we build our mega menu, but there's so much more you can do. So let's talk about embedding a block. In Drupal 7, you make your variable, you invoke the block module, you pass the machine name, and then you render the block. With Twig Tweak, you just do a Drupal block, the machine name of the block, and you put that false flag if your block is not placed on admin structure block. So they added this like halfway through my development cycle. So one morning I upgraded Twig Tweak and I loaded my site and I didn't have a menu and I didn't have a search bar. So that was a pretty fun morning. I was a little bit panicked there. But then I was able to look at the great documentation for Twig Tweak and found that I needed to pass that false in there. And I'm going to show this in action. So this is the code for our mega menu. Basically I have all these divs and all these Drupal blocks that I'm embedding. And this is what it looks like. So for the residential menu, we had 3 different menus, that were kind of expanded. And then, hey, look, there's that $150 toilet rebate. So we're We're really trying to save some money on people's toilets. But the great thing about this is we were able to have the one menu embed plus a menu image block, custom block type that we had. But for the education menu, we had 2 of those menu image blocks, and then the menu was configured a little bit differently. One thing we're sort of working with right now is when you do this, all of these menu titles are H2s, so it's been difficult to get the active trail. This just came up. I was chatting with our lead dev last night. We're trying to figure out how to get the active trail in here. We might do it with CSS for now, but we know there's a better way to do this. So if you're interested in this, hit me up, and I'll tell you how we did it eventually. So I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about paragraphs. We're doing really good on time. I'm moving really quickly, which means we'll have time for questions, unless you just want to listen to a bunch of other music that relates to water, which was kind of the pre-show, getting in the water mood vibe here. But paragraphs, it's great. People talk about it a lot. People talk about atomic design and component-based design. But basically, what we did is we have pages broken out into individual fieldable components, not just the fields themselves. The paragraphs and paragraph types become the building blocks of the site. And paragraphs is stable in D8. It's not even beta. It's like 1.1 or something like that. We have it running on this site and another production site, and it's currently in use on at least two other D8 projects in development. So we flipped the content type architecture on its head, and now we lead with a paragraphs-based architecture. Now, we definitely still use content types for certain things. And, well, I mean, of course we use content types, but I mean, we structure the content types with their own fields for certain things like geolocation. But then again, you could do a geolocation paragraph and just drop it in wherever you want. So, I mean, the possibilities are not limited. I guess not endless. Endless is too intense and too open-ended. They're not limited. I want to talk about our sample paragraph types here. So we've got a text paragraph. You can even set it up where when somebody's creating a new node, it has this text paragraph by default. So it's like nothing has ever changed. The text paragraph is still there. They've got their wonderful CK editor, which no one has ever had any frustrations with, ever. There wouldn't be any need for a complete session on CK editor and the advanced content filter. Moving on, we have embedded content. So this is what I was talking about with the entity reference revision and the views reference field. You can embed a view. You can embed a view display. You can select the block from that dropdown, and it just shows up on the page. So it's a real easy way to give content editors the ability to embed views that either they create or you create for them. So this is a really powerful paragraph type. We also have the accordion paragraph type. So this is referencing a content type that we created called accordion. So the end user content editor could create all these different accordions and then reference them anywhere. So there may be information about both residential and business rates that's exactly the same. So this way, they can have that content in one place, updated in one place, and it gets updated everywhere. So it's been super useful in that way. And then of course we have video gallery. So it's your standard embed a YouTube link. And wouldn't you know it, the example YouTube link I used was 10 hours of Rick Astley, Never Gonna Give You Up. And I definitely did that with the client too, where I was showing them how to use this, and I rickrolled them. And they were very nice about it. So it's always good to have a little bit of humor and, an 80s timeless classic. So configuration, it's just like content types. So you have your same list of the paragraph types. You have your same manage fields, manage display, edit. It's very similar. So instead of structuring at the content type level, you're structuring at the paragraph level. And like with the views embed module and the entity reference module, you can extend paragraphs with some different modules or even build your own if you're interested in kind of taking things to the next paragraph level. And it's super easy for end users. We're looking at a sample rates page here, and they have their text paragraph, they have a bunch of accordions, and then they have another text paragraph. And if they want to, they can drag and drop stuff so that it's in a different order. They can add different paragraphs below this or in between it, and it's super easy for them to manage the content. So now I'm going to transition a little bit into accessibility, and there's a lot of accessibility talk at this conference. I know there's a presentation on it tomorrow. There's at least one or two. So this is really more accessibility from my perspective for this project and me just talking about how I use Axe, and Axe is great. It's a Chrome extension. It's fantastic. It yells at you. It tells you you've done bad things with accessibility. So I'm going to talk a little bit about contrast errors and then accessible forms. But it is by no means a comprehensive accessibility presentation. Just some notes in the context of this project. So for contrast errors, WCAG 2.0 requires 4.5 to 1 contrast for a level AA. Maybe you have to do AA. Maybe you have to do something more stringent because of your constituents. But regardless of how stringent your color ratios need to be, Zen makes it super easy to switch those colors. So one of our greens was failing contrast. I changed the green value in this file, ran my gulp watch was running at the time, and that was it. I was done. I ran axe again and everything checked out fine. So, whenever you have colors in variables, this is just the example with Zen, but when you have colors in variables and you're using SAS or less, if people still use less, I don't know, it's really easy to switch and kind of mitigate against the risk. It's really important to be running these accessibility checks early and often so that you don't have your client running axe and calling you out on it, which didn't happen because we were checking early and checking often. I want to talk a little bit about forms. So all form elements need a label or label designation in the code. So when you can, just show the label. You're done, it's accessible. You can always use a visually hidden class on a label. I know that's built into Zen. It's probably built into other Drupal themes. I'm not sure if it's in core, but if you give a class a visually hidden, label's still there for the screen readers, but you don't see it on the screen. The other thing you can do is use an ARIA label on the form element, and that'll also help you pass. So if you've got an ARIA label on the form element and it doesn't have a label, it'll still pass accessibility, and that's what's going on with this email sign up. And just to note, the ARIA label is separate from the placeholder, so you would have to use both, and the placeholder is that email address text in there. And then W3 has a great tutorial on forms and labels, you should check it out. So I'm going to talk a little bit about caching, and the reason I'm going to talk about this is because CIVIC sites are always a huge target for DDoS and baddies and other things that can really, nail your site and have an impact on the performance. We could do a whole presentation on caching, and this is just from a conversation I had with our CTO, our lead backend developer, and our DevOps engineer. So just some notes on Drupal 8 caching, and if there are Drupal 8 caching experts in this room and I'm wrong, please tell me I'm wrong. Please, I owe you a coffee or a seltzer or whatever. I want to talk to you. First of all, if you're using an outside cache like Varnish or Cloudflare, you have to make sure that the internal page cache module is disabled. It will cause conflicts. We were updating stuff, and it was just not being updated anywhere, and we didn't know what was going on until we disabled the internal page cache module, and then stuff was finally updating for us. It appears that purgers are cron based at the moment, so this means that we have cron running every minute on all of our sites, and this is how we get the URLs queued up to get purged from the system. The documentation out on Drupal 8 and cache tags is at a minimum conflicting. At worst, it can lead you in the wrong direction. The top Google hits are outdated, and you really have to dig to find stuff. So just stay strong and try to tap into your community networks if you have them, because that'll really help you when you're on your quest for purging things and making sure content is updated. Of course, cache tags are the suggested Drupal 8 caching mechanism, but if you don't have the enterprise level Cloudflare, you can't use cache tags. That's just a feature of the enterprise level Cloudflare. So you have to do URL-based purging, which can be very heavy-handed on complex sites. And purging files also takes some effort. So in our bug fix sprint for Denver Water, we spent a solid week trying to get files to purge. There was a weather report PDF that my file entity friend would upload every day, and we just had to, we were manually purging it for him from Varnish, we were manually purging it for him from Cloudflare, and we couldn't get it working until we wrote a module to do it. So now it's working, but it just took a lot of time for us to get it to work. And the same goes for paragraph entity caching. So we wrote a module for that too, inspired by some code developed by Svenda Kabuter. And that's on that Drupal.org post there. And I think that's supposed to make it into the paragraphs module. Don't quote me on that, but we're thinking that it might make it in there. So if you need that entity caching module, hit me up. We can get it to you. It's going to be on Drupal.org at some point, but I think we have another module that's going up sooner for Communico. If anybody works on libraries here, that should be live really soon. So it's a library event management utility. That'll be ready soon, but hopefully paragraph entity caching fixes make it into the paragraphs module, and if they don't, for now we've got this great module that helps us clear it out. Basically what was happening is non-admins were updating content in like an accordion, and that content, when you were on the page that the accordion was referencing, would not update. I could clear the cache as an admin. I could see it. I gave my file entity friend, super admin privileges so he could clear the cache and then he could see it, but it wasn't happening automatically. And if you weren't an admin, you weren't seeing the changes. So just really weird stuff. So TLDR, caching is hard. It's really hard in Drupal 8, but it's getting better, and you can tap into your networks to sort of learn more. And I'm happy to take questions about this when we get to the question part in less than 2 minutes. Woo! So where are we a month from launch? We've got happy content editors, but we haven't heard much from the end users or the higher-ups. And this is okay. I mean, we're a little bit anxious about it. We haven't heard, like, the director of the water company, like, oh my gosh, this site is great. We haven't really received that feedback. And that happens sometimes. Sometimes you just have a quiet launch. Sometimes you like a boring launch and it's all right. But we haven't really received that validation. But my point is, it's okay to not get that validation sometimes, even if it makes you have the feels or whatever. We have tons of work for this client in the pipeline, some really exciting stuff. Our amazing creative director is working on some new videos for them. Basically, they had Flash presentations, and we all know what's happening to Flash. We heard about that. End of life 2020. It's like end of an era, I used to do ActionScript back in the day. So these Flash files are now becoming movies. We're going to replace Google Maps with Mapbox, which is something they wanted but we couldn't get to in the initial build. And then we're going to improve some of the dynamic water data. That weather data PDF, that's going to become a CSV on some watch folder somewhere that populates a view table. We're going to set it and forget it. So that's kind of where we want to go. We finished our bug fix sprint about 2 weeks ago, so it's been going pretty well. It's been out there in the world, and we're really happy with it. I mean, happy enough that I came down here to present on it, so that's pretty good. Talking about takeaways, so overall, CIVIC research, including our analytics tools and interviews, revealed the design problems we had to fix for end users. It's beautiful when that happens. We looked at the data, we looked at the project goals, everything synced up, and we hope we fixed them. We're still running those analytics tools. We just need a little bit more time. We're going to do kind of a post-launch evaluation of the data in a few months once we have enough to work with and we can see really whether this worked, and if there are still any pain points. Hopefully there are not, but if there are, we'll know how to address them. Zen is a powerful theme with tons of helper functions. It's great. It saves a lot of time. It mitigates against risk if you have to change color variables and other things, and it's great. Drupal 8 is totally production ready, and Paragraphs is a great way to structure your site for easy site building and a great experience with lots of flexibility. And with that, I'd like to open it up for questions, if we've got them. Yes?
So, Paragraphs.
Yeah.
You're talking about it. Great, we love it as well. How much time do you think that it saves if you use Paragraphs versus the normal way of doing it in V7 or Paragraphs?
Well, I mean, it really depends on the project and how complex the IA is going to be. So if you...
Use this as your example.
So I think that we probably saved a good, like 15 to 20% this time, just because there was a lot of D8 learning curve with it. A lot of what I was doing in this particular project was orienting myself with D8 and how to kind of get through it. But this next project that we're working on with Paragraphs, I think it's going to save us maybe even closer to 40%. I mean, you're really thinking about content types for very specific purposes, or you're thinking about how do you minimize the number of actual content types you need. There was a great presentation yesterday on view modes, and I don't know if anybody was in the view modes presentation, but you should definitely check that out when it's recorded, because the way that the presenter talked about how things are named really applies to how you could do paragraphs too. You can name something like, hey, it's a banner, or a teaser banner or something like that. Actually, teaser and banner are two different things in this naming convention. I'm really butchering this, so I apologize. But if you structure it, you can save time. Basically, if you say, look, we're only going to do this stuff, then you end up saving time in that way. Does that sort of answer the question?
It does.
Okay.
One of the big things that we're struggling with is sometimes the styling for doing the paragraphs, because you get, I think the naming thing is probably what's going to help you there.
Yeah, so definitely you want to make sure that you're naming your paragraphs in something that's totally, like, there's no confusion about what it is, and then trying to make it consistent so that basically a paragraph has one particular style and that's it, and it's sort of a one-to-one.
Right.
I think if you start adding layers to that, then that's when you're going to start having confusion and more time added to the process. Other question? Yes?
Yeah, sorry to keep talking about paragraphs.
No, I'm happy to talk about paragraphs for as long as you'd like.
I sort of have a twofold question.
Please.
Do you find that paragraphs, because it gives the clients more flexibility to create pages, that you have some inconsistency when it comes to pages and you don't have the same, I don't know if user experience is the right word, but you have them creating all these pages but nothing's really consistent because you have limitless possibilities on what you can create. Do you find that's an issue?
So it depends on the client. So this particular client, we had a very content-focused PM on the client side. So the content creation process that the client owned was made consistent by that resource on their end. So it's almost essential, if you're going to do it this way, that you have a good partnership with the client so that they know that it needs to be consistent. You can't always have the accordions like at the top and then the accordions are at the bottom, and then there's never any intro text, you know, so you would just need to make sure that that's sort of discussed with the client and you have a shared understanding of what that is. But that's a great question. And the second part?
And can you, I don't know if you know this, apply permissions to paragraphs so that there's some editors who can build the page and some can only edit the text within the page?
I'm pretty sure that you can do create and edit permissions on the paragraphs themselves, and then I think you can limit which paragraphs certain end users can create. I think it's the same as content types. After I'm done recording, I could pull up the permission screen and we can double check if you want. So yeah, cool. Other questions on paragraphs or anything else? Okay. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for listening, and I hope this was informative for you, and I hope you go out there and feel confident about Drupal 8 and paragraphs and everything like that. So thanks.